2017 was a year of political turmoil in Washington and here in Iowa. We sit down with a roundtable of Iowa journalists looking ahead to 2018 on this edition of Iowa Press.
Funding for Iowa Press was provided by Friends, the Iowa Public Television Foundation, the Associated General Contractors of Iowa, the public's partner in building Iowa's highway, bridge, and municipal utility infrastructure.
I'm a dad.
I am a mom.
I'm a kid.
I'm a kid at heart. I'm a banker.
I'm an Iowa banker.
No matter who you are, there is an Iowa banker who is ready to help you get where you want to go. Iowa Bankers, allowing you to discover the genuine difference of Iowa banks.
For decades, Iowa Press has brought you politicians and newsmakers from across Iowa and beyond. Now celebrating more than 40 years of broadcast excellence on statewide Iowa Public Television. This is the Friday, December 15 edition of Iowa Press. Here is David Yepsen.
Here in Iowa, 2017 was supposed to be a year free of major elections or presidential caucus campaigns. But if you visit with any of today's political reporters, you'll discover politics never truly slows down in this state. As we pivot to 2018, we've gathered a seasoned group of Iowa reporters to look ahead at another busy political cycle. Jason Noble is chief political reporter for the Des Moines Register. James Lynch is political writer for the Gazette. Joyce Russell covers politics for Iowa Public Radio. And Kay Henderson is news director at Radio Iowa. Well, I'm glad you could all be out here today to do what we all like to do, which is to talk politics. Joyce, big primary and big general election in Alabama. What are the lessons, if any, for politics in this state?
Well, one lesson would be if you have a flawed enough candidate, even a deep red state can turn blue. Okay. The flip side of that is a really good candidate can make a difference in any race. So if any candidate is looking ahead to the next election cycle, if you happen to end up with a deeply flawed candidate, as Doug Jones did, you could take him as a model. The controversy was swirling around him. He stayed in his lane, in his words, and he ran a very good campaign.
Any other thoughts from about Alabama?
Well, I think it's something to watch. This was a special case, but you saw some huge movement in the suburbs of Alabama. And if that happens in Iowa, there are some Republican legislators who might take note and be in trouble if they have, again, a good opponent running against them.
I was struck by the way the margins were reported on how the Democrat was outperforming what Hillary Clinton did, or the Republican was underperforming what Donald Trump did, however you want to look at it. Jason, is this going to make it easier for Democrats to recruit candidates and harder for Republicans?
Absolutely. This is sort of the time in the political calendar where there's a lot of candidate recruitment going on. The party leadership is out there trying to encourage people to vote. I think all of us have sort of heard anecdotally from across the state that there's this outpouring of people who want to run, that there's an enthusiasm out there, particularly among Democrats, to make a go at being a candidate because the environment looks so inviting.
One other lesson, I guess, might be that how prevalent the tribalism is in politics today. When you look at that Alabama race and all of the allegations against Roy Moore and all the reasons to vote against him, and yet he got, what, almost 49% of the vote, and Doug Jones, it was a very narrow victory, even as flawed as Roy Moore was.
Right. I think you have to be careful, too, a little bit about extrapolating things that happen in Alabama and Virginia and the Iowa electorate, because we're demographically much different states.
But we did have a special election in Iowa this past week in northwest Iowa in a district which had more than double the number of registered Republican voters than Democratic voters. It's a district that Donald Trump won by 41%. Not 41% of the vote, but he outperformed Hillary Clinton by 41%. I think it was 68%. And the Democrat, who was a credible candidate, a retired superintendent, well known in that district, in the Lamar, Sioux City area, he came within 10 points. So he made up 31 points based on this small special election electorate as opposed to the general election electorate in 2016.
Jason, the Register came out with some polls in recent days. Fill us in on what the polls are showing. What kind of reaction are you hearing from politicians?
Sure. We were in the field earlier this month with an Iowa poll, polled on the approval rating of our governor, Kim Reynolds. She's polling at 51% say they approve of the job she's doing, which is pretty good numbers for someone who's just sort of still entering the office, still sort of defining her presence as governor. But there were some warning signs for her too. We asked a question about would you like to re-elect Kim Reynolds for a full term or see someone else? And we actually saw 49% plurality say they'd like to see someone new. So that's sort of a warning sign for her and an indication that she needs to sort of define her message more and get out in front of voters.
Joyce, isn't that finding evidence that Governor Kim Reynolds has got to be identified as Kim Reynolds and not Kim Branstad?
Yes, I think very much that's her challenge in this election, is to distinguish herself as a politician in her own right. She's got the edge on name recognition because she's been around along with Governor Branstad. But that poll shows, I think somebody said it shows her as steady but not strong or something like that.
So how does she do that, go out and court new voters and strike a new path, while at the same time not offending the Republican base? I mean, after all, Terry Branstad never lost an election.
Right, that's right. That's a narrow path that she has to follow. And
it's tough because heretofore, the Republican Party of Iowa and Governor Reynolds and other top elected officials have absolutely cleaved to President Trump. There has never been a huge issue on which they have said, you know what, I disagree, or Joni Ernst has said, I just don't pay attention to his tweets. There's been no real policy difference yet. And so it will be interesting as we watch President Trump's public approval rating in Iowa, whether the Iowa Republican Party and its top elected officials, and Kim Reynolds is at the top of that list, choose to differentiate themselves with President Trump.
That's right. I think in 2016, pundits may have been surprised by how well it worked out for Iowa Republicans to really embrace Trump. Now, this Iowa poll that we had just this week, 35% of Iowa voters say Iowans approve of the job that Donald Trump is doing, 60% disapprove. If that's where his popularity remains, or if it gets worse from there, Republicans might have to rethink that strategy.
James, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that in Kim Reynolds' case, she has this narrow path. But she's sticking to the Branstad policies and to traditional Republican policies, and I think she's trying to expand it with her personality, appeal to women voters perhaps, but it's a very narrow path for her, but I think she's trying to do it with her personality, the energy she's bringing to the job, sort of turning it away from Branstad in that way, but the policies are still the same.
The rules of American political history is that midterm elections are always bad for the party in power. There's a lot of data on that. So if Donald Trump has got a 60% disapproval rating in this state, James, does that put Congressman Blum on the cusp of defeat?
Well, it certainly should be a concern. If you like Donald Trump, you're probably going to like Rod Blum and vice versa. Blum made that statement during the campaign, elect me and send Donald Trump to the White House and we're going to get things done. That hasn't worked out real well for Republicans, and apparently Iowans have seen that it's not working out very well. That Register poll found that by a 55 to 44% margin, voters preferred Democrats over Republicans, and that was true in the first district with Rod Blum's case. I think it was 47-29 split that they would favor the Democrat. Yeah, he should be worried.
And in an election year in which Republicans are going to be deploying resources, i.e. money, elsewhere, usually Iowa congressional races mark toward the top of the list in terms of competitive. And so you do see investment come in from outside the state to maintain those seats for Republicans here. I'm not so sure that will be the case this year because there are so many places on the map that Republicans are going to have to invest to retain seats elsewhere. In places like even Pennsylvania, where you have some Republicans who have decided not to seek re-election. And then in the midst of all this, you have Paul Ryan, who has sort of an iffy relationship with Congressman Blum, although he came here to campaign with him in 2016. Blum did not vote to make Paul Ryan Speaker. So you just wonder how many resources Paul Ryan would direct to that race if they have kind of an iffy relationship.
I guess in defense of Blum, he wasn't supposed to win that race in 2014. He wasn't supposed to get reelected in 2016, but he's there. So I guess he can.
And incumbents always win.
Yes.
Well, Joyce, one of the rules of politics is you can't beat somebody with nobody. And so while Republicans may be a little worried, are the Democrats having any great luck recruiting candidates?
Well, they've got a healthy field. They've got a lot of people running. As Jason was said, a lot of people want to run. A lot of Democrats want to run this year. I think another point to make is that 81% of Republicans still favor Trump. So it's not like the whole state is shifting around.
But if
that's been the most interesting reaction to Hillary Clinton's loss among Democrats. They saw that loss, and many of them said, okay, I'm going to run. So they see a setback, and then they step up, which I think is a really interesting philosophical argument for some sort of political science person at a university to study over the next few years.
Well, the election is, 11 months away, so we'll be back around this table to dissect it all. I want to switch gears to the legislature and the coming session. Kay, is there any recurring fallout in the Senate from all of this sexual harassment debate, issue, controversy, lawsuit?
Well, on this program last week, viewers saw the person that has been brought in by Republicans to give advice on sort of professionalizing the human resources aspect of the Iowa State House, especially on the Senate side. You have in the Senate Republican leader Bill Dix, who's the person who fired the communications staffer who then sued and won in a settlement $1.75 million. He is still the Senate Republican leader. I think if he was to be ousted, we would have already seen that. So he seems to not have anyone among the other 28 Republicans in the Senate who wants to step forward and take the path of leadership there and raise money and recruit candidates. So he's survived thus far. The other, shoe to drop here might be how Democrats proceed in the next legislative session. Will, on every budget they debate, Democrats propose spending an additional $1.75 million on X program. I think that will happen, and we have yet to see how this will play out in the next fall election, how this will be used by Democrats as a brickbat against Republican candidates.
Any other thoughts about how this will be used by Democrats?
Well, I think that with so many of these instances of sexual impropriety coming out, it's like you're just waiting for the next day, who's going to be next. And so as I imagine, for example, the Democratic caucus in the House and Senate, I don't know that that's a workable strategy to go after Republicans. I would think that they would be wanting to be talking to their members and being proactive if one of them is going to be the next person that comes out with a scandal.
Jason, do you think there's a chance Democrats could win either chamber of the legislature a year from now?
Nothing is impossible, especially when we're looking at a year where Democrats look very energized, and there's been sort of this overperformance among Democratic candidates in special elections and off-year elections across the country this year. That said, the map in Iowa is pretty daunting. Just look at the Senate, for example. To take the majority, Democrats would have to win 6 seats. There's 25 up. They're defending 14 of those. That means they've got to win 6 of 11 seats currently held by Republicans, and some of those are in some pretty Republican areas. So, in a similar story, I think the pathway might be a little clearer in the House, but it's a big ask.
Right, and we're seeing Republicans recruit some pretty impressive candidates for the
in
Senate.
Democrat-held districts.
Yeah, so one of the things that's true, we all know this about Iowa, we need to remind ourselves, it's always the candidate that counts. We're talking about local legislators, people know them. The fact that there's a problem in Des Moines may not really make any difference at all to a Republican candidate elsewhere who's well known by his or her friends and neighbors. Joyce, let's switch gears to policy up there. What's the state's financial condition? What effect is that going to have on the debate?
Well, the Revenue Estimating Conference came out with their latest estimate of tax receipts, and once again, they're projecting that tax receipts for this fiscal year, that this year's budget is based on, are once again going to fall short. So, first thing, they're going to come back, and it looks like they're going to have to cut money from this year's budget. Similarly, they've lowered the projection for next year, so there's going to be another tight budget next year. And I can't help but remember all of the years when you would come back in the legislature and there would be a supplemental appropriations bill. We're going to spend more money this year, and now the trend seems to be in the other direction.
What is the Republican tax bill going to look like? The governor is saying she wants a tax bill.
Well, there's plenty of appetite in the, once the Republicans took control of the State House, it was clear there was plenty of appetite for tax cuts. Last year, the condition of the budget kept that from happening. This year, Governor Reynolds says she wants simpler and lower taxes. Senator Dix says that he would like to eliminate the income tax bill, so we know where he's coming from. There seems to be a little more moderation in the House, however. I heard the Majority Leader Chris Hagenow at one of the forums say, he said, I welcome the discussion about cutting taxes. He said, if there is a bill out there, I would want it to be significant, but my main goal is to balance the budget. So there's going to be that tension again this year.
James is talking about comparing yourself in Iowa to comparing yourself to South Dakota or Kansas, a way to get votes in the legislature. A lot of Iowans don't necessarily want to compare themselves to those two states.
Especially Kansas. I think everybody is aware of the problems they've had with the approach they took to cutting taxes. They didn't cut spending enough, apparently, and they ran out of money, and it's been quite a mess down there. South Dakota is often mentioned because they don't have a sales or a income tax, as Bill Dix likes to point out, and their economy is growing. That's open to debate whether it's growing any faster than Iowa's economy and whether or not that's the direction we want to go. But yeah, we'll hear those examples. I think we'll hear Republicans talk about South Dakota, Democrats talk about Kansas.
I think Republicans are in a fevered rush to pass some sort of tax cut bill because they have such large majorities in the House and the Senate, and they want to take action on something. They think this may never happen again in their lifetimes. And so I think that's the push that may make them pass some sort of tax reform and even make it applicable in the coming years, not immediately. So recognizing the current budget realities, but sort of having a blueprint laid out there.
Well, you've got two issues. One, do you want to do tax reform, which is a loaded term. It means different things to different people. If you want to do tax reform, or do you want to have a tax cut?
Yes.
Recently, Kay, we've had interest groups talking about raising the cigarette tax.
Indeed. And the interesting thing about the proposal from the American Heart, Lung Cancer Societies, and more than a dozen other groups, including the school counselors of Iowa, is that the proposal would be to raise it $1.50 for a pack of cigarettes. That would more than double the tax, number one. Number two, these groups are suggesting this money could be used for other purposes in addition to tobacco cessation programs, namely mental health. There's been a huge discussion in Iowa about the status of the mental health system in Iowa. It comes from law enforcement who can't find places to take people who are in an acute mental health crisis. It comes from families who have dealt with a system that is arcane, confusing, and not offering them treatment options within the state's borders. So there's pressure to find ways somewhere to find new money for the mental health system. In fact, Ron Corbett, the Republican who's running for governor, suggested legalizing sports betting and using the additional taxes that would be paid to the state to support mental health programs.
One approach we might see is sort of a omnibus tax package where we look at, tax cuts, but at the same time look at extending the school save tax, the sales tax for school infrastructure, raising the cigarette tax, a tax for water, the 3/8 cents sales tax for water.
What about that, James? I mean, what is that going to do? Does that have any 3/8 of a cent sales tax increase? Is a tax increase. A lot of Republicans have a hard time.
The key will be somehow cloaking it in the idea of neutrality, that this is going to be revenue neutral, that your tax liability won't go up. We're just sort of moving the deck chairs around. You're going to pay more sales tax but less income tax, pay those sorts of things. And if they can sell that, that's quite an achievement.
Getting rid of the loopholes, would be a phrase that would.
And then the whole tax credit debate.
Right.
Getting rid of some of those tax credits, the incentives for economic development.
The governor, Jason, is talking about wanting to do a water quality bill, but Democrats are saying it won't do anything if you don't put any money in it. I mean, it's just you write water quality on a piece of paper, and it's a water quality bill. Will the legislature, in your estimation, pass some kind of meaningful water quality legislation?
I think that there's a bipartisan agreement that they want to get that done. I think that there's intense pressure on Republicans to come out of this session with big wins. I think 2017 was viewed as a session where they made a lot of unpopular changes or things that may have affected some people in a negative way. They want to deliver something this time. Water quality, there is buy-in on either side to do that. But it's a question of resources and whether the investment will be significant.
I think it's a very high priority for Governor Reynolds. She has said that she wants that to be the first bill that she signs as governor. When she was inaugurated and gave her speech on Inauguration Day, the prepared text for that speech included water quality, but that was not in her delivered speech. And I asked her about that, and she said, I'm working with people already behind the scenes to try to get an agreement among Republicans, and that she didn't want to rock that boat by stirring that up in her inaugural speech. So it's a very high priority.
Well, as always, we've got way too many things to talk about and not enough time, so I want to quickly go through a couple more of these. Kay, privatization of Medicaid. Very controversial. Anything going to change with that in the session?
It will not, because the governor is married to the plan to have private companies manage care for Medicaid patients. Democrats have been calling for rolling it back and having the state manage that care. This will become part of the Democratic discussion about the management that the new governor is making, the management decision she's making in the state government.
And Jason, the IPERS system. A lot of talk about making changes to that. Is that a live round?
I think it's a lot of talk. Okay. There was a report that came out earlier this month. There's a $7 billion unfunded liability for the IPERS system, the Public Employees Retirement System. That sounds like a big number. The system is actually still actuarially sound. There's no great concern here. You saw a couple of Democrats, the treasurer, Mike Fitzgerald, Senator Matt McCoy, come out and say, watch out, Republicans are going to come after this session, to which Republicans, Don Pettengill in the State House immediately said, we have no plans to touch IPERS. We're not going to do it.
There are something like 350,000 IPERS recipients
1 out of 10
in every district.
That's not a constituency Republicans want.
At the federal level, you've got the Metascare, that Democrats often say they're coming after your Medicare. Well, here at the state level, you've got sort of IPERS scare.
And there's also a playbook for this. 2005, George W. Bush tried to privatize Social Security, so they just need to go back and get that quarter.
We've got just a minute left. One hot issue is fireworks. People in Iowa are really upset by all the noise at the holiday time. Is something going to happen on fireworks?
Who would have thought?
I know.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because we have another fireworks season coming up over the holidays, and most cities, or several cities around the state, Cedar Rapids, Waterloo, and others, have banned the use of fireworks. You can still buy the fireworks, but you'll have to find somewhere else to use them. And I don't think the legislature is going to touch that. I don't think they have votes to expand it. And if anything happened, it would be to clamp down on the sale and use of fireworks.
Joyce, we have 30 seconds. Talk about changing the bottle bill comes up periodically. Do you think that will happen in this session?
No, I think this year, again, you'll have a bill to get rid of Iowa's bottle deposit law and another bill to expand it. So I think it's going to be a stalemate again.
Nobody wants to deal with that. Jason, quickly, mental health legislation? Anything happening there?
That, again, sort of like water quality, is something there's this widespread agreement on, but it's a huge funding issue. How are you going to pay for it, and what would the reforms actually look like? That's still being worked out.
Okay,
still
great.
unknown.
Well, we're out of time, but we'll get back together to talk about all these issues as the session and as the campaigns progress. Thanks to all of you for being here today. And thank you for joining our latest edition of Iowa Press. We'll be back next week with another edition, Medical Marijuana and Opioid Issues in Iowa, with Representative John Forbes and Gerd Claybaugh, Director of the Iowa Department of Public Health. Iowa Press at our regular air times, Friday night at 7:30 and Sunday at noon on our main IPTV channel, with a rebroadcast on our .3 World channel Saturday morning at 8:30. For all of us here at Iowa Public Television, I'm David Yepsen. Thanks for joining us today.
Funding for Iowa Press was provided by Friends, the Iowa Public Television Foundation, the Associated General Contractors of Iowa, the public's partner in building Iowa's highway, bridge, and municipal utility infrastructure.
I'm a dad.
I am a mom.
I'm a kid.
I'm a kid at heart. I'm a banker.
I'm an Iowa banker.
No matter who you are, there is an Iowa banker who is ready to help you get where you want to go. Iowa Bankers, allowing you to discover the genuine difference of Iowa banks.